So I want to bring in one more element here, because we've been talking about a lot of the stakeholders, but there's one stakeholder that's been glaringly omitted, and that's the manufacturer. So the FDA, while working towards gathering patient input, is now really focusing more on having PROs incorporated into drug label. How do you think this is going to impact this scenario that we're describing, where we really see this sea change in the way that healthcare is practiced?
Well, look, I think the FDA can help facilitate a movement towards the collection of this kind of data. Historically, and when I was at the agency, I think that there was a lot of ambivalence to allowing PROs into drug labels. The agency extrapolated from a couple experiences where they thought that they had a bad experience with allowing PROs into drug labels where it potentiated what they felt was excessive use. And I think they also worry about how PROs are going to be interpreted by patients, whether or not patients are going to overemphasize quality of life claims put in labeling over absolute efficacy claims, especially in the oncology setting where a lot of the focus of regulators is on the absolute efficacy of the product and curing the cancer or treating the cancer, as opposed to some of the other things that you might do to help the patient have a better quality of life. So the guidance historically that the agency's put out, I don't think has been as helpful as it could be to manufacturers trying to pursue these. Manufacturers will tell you that it's a very cumbersome process to get these claims into labeling. That said, they've redone that guidance a few times, and they seem to be making much more of a public effort to come up with the right measures that they'll feel comfortable incorporating into labeling and allowing claims around.
If you think about it for a second, I'm sorry to say that most patients with adult malignancy will, if that has recurred, will ultimately die of that malignancy. And so the decision making about what treatment should be given first, all that stuff, is largely based on efficacy. Whether that efficacy is an accurate representation of the truth or not is a whole different question. But I think, you know, if we think about how you would want to be treated, how I would want to be treated, I would want to know whether it works and what's it going to cost me. And the whole thing about patient-reported outcomes, it really is an attempt to identify what it's going to cost me. So I think it's highly unlikely that the payers, for example, will use patient-reported outcomes for benefits designed so as to not pay for something. I don't think that's common. I think what's much more likely, and actually which is much better, is that it would be part of shared decision-making, because although there may not be a best way to do things, I guarantee you there's a worst way to do things. And to the extent that we can avoid that, everybody benefits.
And when you say what it's going to cost me, you mean in
Toxicity?
global terms, right?
Cost,
Exactly.
everything.
And
I mean,
patients,
everything.
right? And patients make trade-offs based on side effect profile all the time. I mean, even if regulators don't always recognize that, patients will sometimes trade off absolute efficacy for.
So I think this is actually the perfect segue.